The growl of the engine was unmistakable, not the deep, confident rumble expected from a high-end sports car, but something uneven, wounded, as if the machine itself was complaining. It coasted to a stop in front of Jack Wilson's modest garage, the sound fading into an unsettling rattle. The building itself looked out of place compared to the gleaming vehicle that now idled at its door, peeling paint on the siding, an old tin sign swinging lazily in the breeze, and a single open bay framed with oil-stained concrete. The car's driver swung his door open with a sharp, practiced motion. Out stepped Malcolm Reed, CEO of Reed Enterprises, a man whose very name was associated with sharp suits, sharper deals, and a garage full of the world's most coveted automobiles. His tailored jacket caught the morning light, and his expression carried the weight of a man perpetually unimpressed. Malcolm didn't bother to hide his distaste for his surroundings. His gaze swept the single lift, the cluttered workbench, and the worn overalls of the man approaching his car. Jack Wilson, late 40s, hair threaded with silver, hands marked by a lifetime of mechanical labor, looked every bit the small-town mechanic. There was a calm steadiness to his movements, a quiet patience that contrasted starkly with the CEO's coiled impatience. "You really think you can fix this?" Malcolm's words weren't directed at Jack so much as at the young assistant trailing behind him. His voice carried that blend of condescension and amusement only the truly wealthy seem to perfect. "This guy probably can't even afford the oil in this car." From behind the counter, Jack's daughter froze. Emma Wilson, 17 and quick-witted, felt her stomach tighten at the remark. Her eyes dropped to the ledger she'd been organizing, not trusting herself to meet Malcolm Reed's gaze. She knew better than to speak up, but the flush of anger on her cheeks was hard to hide. Jack didn't respond to the insult. Instead, he popped the hood, letting the hiss of the engine mask the silence. His hands, calloused, steady, and far more skilled than they appeared, began to probe the tangle of polished components. The engine's noise wasn't a standard issue. He could hear it in the rhythm, could feel it in the faint tremors through the frame. Something subtle, something that didn't belong. Malcolm smirked as if the lack of verbal defense confirmed his judgment. "Thomas," he said to his assistant, "remind me again why we're here instead of sending this to the specialists in Pittsburgh." "Time constraint, sir," Thomas replied quietly, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. Jack asked Emma to fetch a specialized torque wrench. As she handed it over, Malcolm's eyebrow arched. "Specialized? Here." He chuckled under his breath. "Charming." The jab rolled off Jack like rain on wax. He'd heard worse. He'd endured worse. But in the quiet corners of his mind, a different truth hummed. Because beneath the grease and worn flannel was a man who once walked the bright halls of an engineering college, a man professors had called a natural. Back then, his future had stretched far and bright, until tragedy had slammed the door shut. He never talked about the day his wife died giving birth to Emma, or the months of crushing debt that followed. He never mentioned how he left school to take whatever jobs he could find, or how eventually he ended up here in Millfield, just another name on the main street, fixing farm trucks and family sedans. But some parts of that man refused to die. At night, after the lights in the garage went dark and Emma was asleep, Jack would sit at his small desk and sketch engine designs by the glow of a single lamp. Not fanciful doodles, but intricate, calculated concepts that solved efficiency problems even major manufacturers still struggled with. He never shared them, not with customers, not with colleagues. They were just his. Today, though, as he adjusted the torque and felt the engine's subtle resistance under his hands, one of those old designs stirred in his mind. He recognized the flaw instantly, a structural quirk that put unnecessary strain on a key connection. He had once written about this exact weakness in his notebook. "Mr. Reed," Jack said evenly, "I think I found the problem. There's a design element in this model that causes—" "Oh, now you're an engineer, too?" Malcolm interrupted, glancing theatrically around the shop. "Where's your degree?" Hanging between the air fresheners and the 2017 calendar. Emma's hands tightened around the counter, but Jack's expression didn't change. "I can make a temporary fix today," he said calmly, "but it will come back unless the design flaw is addressed. Just make it stop making noise." Malcolm replied, already scrolling through his phone. I don't need design advice from a small-town mechanic. Jack set to work without another word. The repair required precision, but it came to him as naturally as breathing. When he finished, the car's engine purred, a perfect, smooth hum. He explained the fix and handed over the modest bill. That's it? Malcolm asked, eyebrows raised. He tossed his platinum credit card onto the counter. I assume you take real payment methods here, not just chickens and handyman favors. Emma processed the payment in silence, her jaw tight. As Malcolm prepared to leave, something on Jack's workbench caught his attention. An open notebook filled with meticulous sketches. Malcolm picked it up, without asking. Quite the imagination you've got here, he said, flipping through the pages. Playing inventor in your spare time? Those are private, Jack said sharply, reaching for the notebook. Malcolm smirked, holding it just out of reach. Interesting, completely impractical, of course. But I suppose everyone needs a hobby, even those who'll never have the means to pursue it. He tossed it back onto the bench like a discarded brochure. The sports car slid out of the lot moments later, its polished body reflecting the dull light of the overcast sky. Jack watched it go, the notebook safe once more under his hand. Why do you let people like that talk to you that way? Emma asked, the question heavy with frustration. Jack put an arm around her shoulders. Because what he thinks doesn't matter. I know who I am. I know what I can do. That's enough. But that night, as Emma slept upstairs, Jack found himself staring at the sketches again. They were the same designs Malcolm had mocked, concepts he'd spent years refining, yet never tested. He closed the notebook gently, setting it aside. Tomorrow, there would be bills to pay and cars to fix. He didn't know it yet, but the man in the sports car hadn't left him behind entirely. Their paths would cross again, soon, and in ways neither of them could have predicted. By midweek, the memory of Malcolm Reed's visit had settled into the dusty corners of Jack Wilson's mind. Just another unpleasant encounter in a long career of dealing with difficult customers. The garage smelled faintly of motor oil and coffee as he replaced the worn filter in Mrs. Peterson's aging sedan. Outside, a late autumn chill hung in the air, and the hum of passing trucks was the only sound. Emma sat at the counter, sorting through a pile of receipts, when her eyes flicked up to the small television mounted in the corner. She froze. Dad, she called urgently, you need to see this. Jack straightened from beneath the hood, wiping his hands on a rag as he walked over. On the TV, Malcolm Reed stood in front of a row of cameras at what appeared to be some industry event. He was smiling, though Jack had learned quickly that Malcolm's smiles rarely meant anything good. The interviewer asked something Jack couldn't quite catch, but the answer was crystal clear. Malcolm held up a familiar object, Jack's notebook. It was open to one of his engine designs, the intricate lines and handwritten annotations visible even on the grainy broadcast. And here, Malcolm announced with a chuckle, is an example of the kind of, let's say, ambitious thinking you sometimes find in small towns. A local mechanic who's convinced he's reinvented the combustion engine. He turned the pages lazily for the cameras, letting the designs flash in full view. The crowd around him laughed, some politely, others openly. Jack felt a slow, cold heaviness spread in his chest. This wasn't just mockery. This was his private work turned into a prop. Emma was already scrolling furiously on her phone. It's on social media too, she said, her voice tight. She turned the screen toward him. Malcolm's post had the photo of the notebook, accompanied by the caption, "Local mechanic thinks he's Enzo Ferrari. Stick to oil changes, buddy." Below it, comments poured in, some laughing along, others defending the unknown mechanic. Jack saw his designs dissected by strangers, some dismissing them as nonsense, others debating their feasibility. "It doesn't matter," he said finally, though the words lacked conviction. "Let's finish Mrs. Peterson's car." But Emma's eyes told him it did matter, to her at least. She'd grown up watching him pore over those sketches. To see them ridiculed so publicly felt like a violation. The next morning, the first light of dawn had barely reached the streets of Millfield when Jack arrived at the garage. The air was crisp enough to sting his lungs. As he approached the front door, he noticed a vehicle parked at the curb, a sleek, black coupe, unlike anything he'd seen outside of glossy magazines. It wasn't Malcolm's sports car. This was rarer, quieter in its presence, but no less commanding. Jack recognized the model instantly. A Ferrari prototype, one that wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the public market yet. The driver's door opened, and a tall woman stepped out. She wore an impeccably cut charcoal suit, her dark hair pinned neatly at the nape of her neck. Even in the pale morning light, there was a precision about her, a kind of deliberate grace that spoke of both authority and confidence. "Are you Jack Wilson?" she asked, her accent soft but distinctly Italian. "Yes, ma'am," Jack said cautiously, wiping his hands even though they weren't yet dirty. "How can I help you?" "My name is Dr. Alessandra Rossi. I'm the head of engineering at Ferrari." She extended her hand. Jack blinked, momentarily convinced he'd misheard. "Ferrari," he repeated. Dr. Rossi nodded. "I'd like to discuss your engine design innovations." Inside the small office, the three of them sat, Jack behind the desk, Dr. Rossi in the visitor's chair, Emma perched quietly near the doorway, eyes darting between them. The Ferrari parked outside might as well have been a spaceship, for how surreal the moment felt. Dr. Rossi placed a slim tablet on the desk and tapped the screen. Malcolm Reed's mocking social media post appeared, but her focus was not on the man in the suit. "Yesterday, one of our junior engineers happened to see this image online," she explained. "In the background of Mr. Reed's commentary were your designs. We enhanced the photo and studied them closely." She swiped to another screen, revealing digital renderings of Jack's sketches, cleaned up and colored. "These address efficiency problems we've been wrestling with for years." Emma's smile was fierce with pride. "Those are my dad's," she said. "He's been working on them forever." "The thermal efficiency concept alone is remarkable," Dr. Rossi agreed. "And there's more. The repair you performed on Mr. Reed's vehicle? That model has a known issue. You diagnosed and mitigated it without access to any proprietary documentation." Jack hesitated. "They're just theoretical ideas. I never had the means to test them." "We do," she said simply. "And we like to offer you a consulting position to develop these concepts, with full patent rights in your name." The figure she named for the contract made Emma gasp. Jack had to grip the edge of the desk. This can't be real," he murmured. "Did Reed send you here as some kind of joke?" Dr. Rossi's gaze hardened. "On the contrary, Mr. Reed is the reason I came in person. When we contacted him about you, he dismissed you entirely, said you were a nobody. That's when I decided to meet you myself." From her tablet, she played a simulation. Jack's design brought to life in motion, the numbers beside it showing efficiency gains that no manufacturer had yet achieved. "There's an Automotive Innovation Conference in Detroit next week," she continued. "We'd like you to attend as our guest. Your work will be part of our keynote presentation." Emma turned to her father. "We can close the shop for a week, Dad. Mrs. Peterson's oil change can wait." Dr. Rossi smiled faintly. "We've already arranged accommodations for both of you." When she left, the Ferrari's engine purred down the street, leaving the scent of new opportunity in its wake. Jack and Emma stood in the silence of the small garage, surrounded by the familiar clutter of their old life. But now, the air felt different. Jack's eyes drifted to the battered notebook on his desk. The same notebook that had been mocked by a CEO and noticed by one of the most respected engineers in the world. "Dad," Emma asked softly, "what are you thinking?" Jack's fingers traced the edge of the cover. "I'm thinking," he said slowly, "that maybe being underestimated isn't always a bad thing." The Detroit Convention Center was a living engine of its own. Thousands of moving parts, each buzzing with anticipation. Banners hung from the vaulted ceilings, spotlighting the latest breakthroughs in automotive technology. The air smelled faintly of coffee, polished chrome, and ambition. Jack Wilson adjusted the unfamiliar knot of his new tie. The suit felt strange on him, as if he were wearing someone else's skin. Beside him, Emma practically vibrated with excitement, snapping photos of every gleaming prototype and futuristic display they passed. "Dad," she whispered suddenly, leaning close. "He's here." Jack followed her gaze. Across the main lobby, Malcolm Reed entered like he owned the place, flanked by two assistants, flashing his well-practiced smile at industry contacts. His stride was confident, but Jack noticed something subtle. Not everyone was smiling back. Some nodded politely, others barely acknowledged him at all. "Don't worry about him," Jack said quietly, though his own stomach tightened. He still couldn't shake the suspicion that somehow this was all too good to be true. The day's keynote event belonged to Ferrari. Backstage, Dr. Alessandra Rossi found them, her expression bright with anticipation. "Ready?" she asked. "For what exactly?" Jack replied. "You mentioned I'd be recognized, but plans have changed," she said with the ease of someone used to rearranging people's futures. "The response to your design has been overwhelming. We'd like you to join us on stage and explain your thought process." Jack's eyes widened. "Explain? To this crowd?" "You'll do fine," she assured him. "They'll want to hear it from the source." Before he could argue, the lights dimmed. The Ferrari CEO took the stage, speaking passionately about innovation, sustainability, and the need for fresh ideas in a competitive industry. Jack half listened until he saw it. Projected on the massive screen was a professional 3D rendering of one of his own designs. His own handwriting from the original sketch had been preserved as a detail in the corner. "This revolutionary approach to thermal efficiency," the CEO said, "is the most significant leap in engine design we've seen in over a decade. And it came from a mind outside the traditional halls of the industry. Please welcome the engineer behind it, Jack Wilson." Applause thundered. Emma grinned and gave him a little shove. Jack's legs moved almost without his permission. As he passed the third row, his eyes caught Malcolm Reed's face, frozen mid-expression, mouth slightly open, phone forgotten in his hand. On stage, the spotlight was hot and bright. Jack took a slow breath and began. He spoke simply, avoiding jargon where he could, explaining how his design improved thermal transfer, reduced wasted energy, and addressed a problem that had quietly plagued manufacturers for years. At first, he was hyper-aware of the audience, but as he talked about engines, something he knew down to the bone, his nerves settled. He gestured toward the projection, tracing airflow paths with his hand. He told them why this solution mattered not just for performance, but for efficiency and longevity. When he finished, the applause returned. Louder, more genuine. Then came the questions. Industry veterans stood to ask for clarifications. Others wanted to know if he'd considered specific applications. Jack answered each one with the quiet confidence of a man who'd been refining these ideas in solitude for years. During the break, he found himself surrounded by a crowd, engineers, executives, journalists, all eager to shake his hand, exchange cards, and talk about possible collaborations. Emma stayed nearby, taking it all in with a smile that didn't fade. And then, through the throng, Malcolm Reed appeared. "Jack," Malcolm said smoothly, "what a surprise. If I'd known you had talents like this, I would have treated our last meeting differently." Jack gave him a polite nod. "Possibly. Perhaps we could discuss a role at Reed Enterprises," Malcolm continued. "I'm always looking for innovative thinkers." Before Jack could respond, a distinguished man joined them. Jack Wilson, Harold Barnes, Editor-in-Chief of Automotive Engineering Today. "We'd love to feature your story." "His story," Malcolm interjected quickly, "is one I know well. In fact, I was one of the first to recognize his potential when he serviced my car." Barnes raised an eyebrow. "Really? That's not what I've heard." He pulled a tablet from his bag and tapped the screen. There, in high resolution, was Malcolm's social media post, the mocking caption, the photo of Jack's notebook. "Local mechanic thinks he's Enzo Ferrari. Stick to oil changes, buddy." The surrounding conversation quieted. Malcolm's confident smile faltered. "That was just a bit of fun between friends," he said quickly, clapping a hand on Jack's shoulder. Jack removed it. "We're not friends, Mr. Reed." Dr. Rossi, who had been nearby, stepped into the circle. "When we contacted your office about Mr. Wilson, we were told he was a nobody and not worth our time. That information came directly from you." Malcolm's assistant, Thomas, shifted uncomfortably. "Actually, sir, I have the emails." The murmur in the group deepened. Someone lifted their phone, recording. Barnes smiled thinly. This will make an even better article. Jack glanced around at the crowd, not just at Malcolm, but at the many faces watching, curious to see how he would respond. This isn't just about me or Mr. Reed, he said. It's about the fact that innovation can come from unexpected places. Credentials don't always tell the full story. Dr. Rossi nodded. Exactly why Ferrari is launching a new scouting initiative, to find ideas in places the industry usually ignores. Malcolm tried once more. Jack, let's talk privately. I'm sure we can work out something mutually beneficial. I don't think so, Jack interrupted. But I am curious. When you bought that automotive parts company last year, did you review their experimental research division before shutting it down? Malcolm blinked. That decision was based on profitability. Pity, Jack said evenly. They were developing components that would have paired perfectly with my design. According to Ferrari's simulations, they would have increased efficiency another 15%. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Dr. Rossi added, "We've already filed patents." Malcolm's color drained. The conversation around them swelled. Industry leaders murmuring about the missed opportunity, journalists scribbling notes. The CEO who had mocked a small-town mechanic now stood exposed in front of his peers. That evening, videos of the exchange began flooding social media. Jack's story spread rapidly. The mechanic who outsmarted a CEO. Malcolm's mocking post resurfaced, juxtaposed with images of Jack on stage. The contrast was irresistible. For Jack, the conference ended not just with applause, but with signatures, formalizing his consulting contract with Ferrari. As he and Emma left the hall, the notebook was tucked under his arm, no longer a private indulgence, but a recognized blueprint for the future. "Dad," Emma said as they stepped into the cool Detroit night, "you just made history." Jack smiled faintly. "Maybe. Or maybe we've just gotten started." 6 months after Detroit, the garage on the corner of Mill Street looked the same from the outside. Same old sign, same oil-stained driveway. But step through the doors and you entered another world. Wilson Automotive Engineering wasn't just a repair shop anymore. New workbenches gleamed under bright LED lights. State-of-the-art diagnostic tools lined the walls. A section of the floor had been transformed into a small engineering lab, complete with 3D printers, testing rigs, and a pair of prototype engines mounted like museum pieces. One of those engines was his, the design that had once lived only in the pages of a battered notebook. Now it was a tangible, roaring piece of machinery that had already attracted the attention of 3 major European manufacturers. On the wall above it hung framed patent certificates, his name printed in clean black ink beside the official seals. Jack stood by the prototype, running a hand along its polished casing. The deep hum it produced during testing still made his chest tighten, not with nerves, but with pride. From the office doorway, Dr. Alessandra Rossi, Alessandra, now appeared, tablet in hand. Their working relationship had shifted since that first morning in Millfield. Where once she'd been a formal, slightly intimidating figure, now there was an ease between them, a shorthand born from countless hours refining designs and trading ideas. "The simulation results just came in," she said, walking toward him. "Better than expected. We're looking at unprecedented thermal efficiency. Production models could be ready next quarter if the board approves." Jack scanned the numbers. "Promising," he admitted. "But theory isn't the same as long-term wear. The real test is how it handles 5 years down the line." Alessandra smiled. "Ever the perfectionist. That's why Ferrari values you. You think like an engineer and a mechanic." The bell above the front door chimed. Emma's voice carried from the reception area. "Dad, the film crew is here." A team from Automotive Engineering today rolled in with tripods and lights. The Detroit conference had made Jack's story a sensation, not just in automotive circles, but across industries that valued innovation. His name had become shorthand for the overlooked genius, and now a full-length documentary was in the works. The producer shook Jack's hand. "We'd like to start with where it all began." Jack gestured toward the far corner of the garage, the old, oil-stained workbench he refused to replace. "Right here," he said. Fixing cars, solving problems. That's where the designs came from. As the crew set up, Jack noticed Emma deep in conversation with the young sound engineer, her hands moving animatedly as she explained something. He recognized the look on her face, the same bright focus she had when they worked on engines together. The interview stretched through the afternoon. Jack spoke about his early dreams, the sudden loss of his wife, and the years of raising Emma while keeping the garage afloat. When they asked about Malcolm Reed, he paused. Mr. Reed's actions, he said carefully, ultimately led to my work being noticed by the right people. I can't be angry about that. The producer tilted his head, remarkably gracious, considering what's happened to him since. Jack only shrugged. Success and failure both reveal character. My focus is on building something meaningful, not someone else's downfall. After the crew packed up, Alessandra lingered. I've been offered the position to head Ferrari's new North American research division, she said casually, watching his reaction. That's fantastic, Jack said sincerely. Where will it be based? She hesitated. The board is considering several sites. One of them is 30 minutes from here. He glanced up from the blueprints. Really, proximity to emerging talent, she said with a small smile, and the chance to keep collaborating, conveniently. Before Jack could answer, Emma burst into the workshop. Dad, I just got invited to present our joint project at the MIT Student Symposium next month. She spotted Alessandra and grinned. Oh, hi. Are you staying for dinner again? I'd like that, Alessandra replied, exchanging a warm look with Jack. Later that night, after the dishes were washed and the house was quiet, Jack drove to the cemetery on the edge of town. The air was cool, the sky scattered with stars. He knelt by Sarah's headstone, placing fresh flowers at its base. I wish you could see Emma now, he murmured. She's going to MIT. Everything we dreamed for her. He traced the carved letters with his fingertips. And I'm finally doing what you always believed I could. Remember those designs you used to tell me to send to the manufacturers? Turns out you were right all along. The next morning, Jack pulled up outside Millfield High School. The engineering club had invited him to speak. The students, most of whom had known him only as Emma's dad who fixes cars, looked at him now with a mix of curiosity and respect. I'm not here to tell you every dream comes true, he began, or that if you just believe hard enough, success will magically find you. What I can tell you is that knowledge and skill are valuable no matter where they come from. Your ideas matter, even when no one's ready to hear them. A student raised her hand. Did you ever think about giving up? Jack thought for a moment. Every single day. But I kept sketching. Not because I thought it would make me famous, but because solving those problems gave me purpose. That's the secret. Find work that matters to you, even when no one else is watching. Afterward, students lined up to show him their projects, handmade prototypes, CAD designs, even a few rough sketches in spiral notebooks. He recognized the same hunger in their eyes that had kept him working all those years in quiet. That weekend, Jack took Emma to the National Automotive Museum, something he'd promised years ago but could never afford until now. They spent hours moving through exhibits, tracing the history of engine design from the earliest steam models to cutting-edge hybrids. You know, Emma said, studying a display, your designs might be in a place like this someday. Jack smiled. Maybe. But more important is that you'll be designing the future, not just reading about it. In the next gallery, a familiar voice called out. Jack turned to see Thomas, Malcolm Reed's former assistant. The younger man looked slightly nervous. Mr. Wilson, I wasn't sure if you'd want to talk to me, but I wanted to apologize for my part in how you were treated. Jack shook his hand. No apology necessary. You were doing your job. Not anymore, Thomas said. I work for an engineering firm now. We're developing programs for unconventional talent. Your story inspired the shift. As Thomas walked away, Emma nudged her father. See? You're already changing things. That evening, as they drove home, Jack's phone rang. Alessandra's voice came through, warm and certain. We've finalized the location for the North American Research Center. Construction starts next month, just outside Millfield. I'll be relocating in 6 weeks. Jack felt a smile tug at his mouth. That's good news. I was hoping, she said after a pause, that we might discuss it further over dinner. Just the two of us. Jack's pulse jumped in a way it hadn't in years. I'd like that. When the call ended, he noticed Emma watching him with that knowing grin. What? He asked. Nothing, she said innocently. Just wondering how long it'll take Ferrari's engineering genius to realize she's been looking at you like that for months. Jack laughed, shaking his head. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, the future ahead didn't feel like a responsibility to bear, but a horizon worth running toward. Morning sunlight streamed through the wide windows of Wilson Automotive Engineering, casting warm light across the organized chaos of the shop floor. Jack stood at his workbench, a set of polished tools laid out with almost surgical precision. In the corner, a prototype engine purred softly on the test rig, the steady hum a promise of things to come. It was quieter than usual. Emma had left early to meet a study group for the MIT symposium she'd been invited to present at. Jack had smiled when she'd hurried out the door, laptop bag bouncing against her shoulder. She was on her way, just like he'd always hoped. Maybe more than he'd dared to hope. The shop door opened and Alessandra stepped in, the crisp air from outside following her. She was in jeans and a dark sweater today, less Ferrari executive, more neighbor. Still, she carried herself with that same quiet authority. I come bearing good news, she said, setting a folder on his desk. The board has approved the production model. Your design will go into manufacturing next quarter. Jack picked up the folder, flipping through the renderings and test reports. Seeing his name printed on the official documentation felt surreal, even now. That's fast, he said. They want to make a statement, she replied. And I think they're right. The industry is paying attention. He closed the folder. I'm still getting used to all this. The attention, the scale. 6 months ago, I was just fixing Mrs. Peterson's sedan. Alessandra smiled. You're still the same man who fixed that sedan. You just have a bigger toolbox now. Later that afternoon, Jack drove to the construction site for the new North American Research Center. The steel skeleton of the building was already rising from the ground, surrounded by cranes and the steady thump of machinery. Workers moved purposefully, laying the foundations for something that would outlast all of them. He walked the perimeter with the site manager, picturing the labs, the testing bays, the open spaces where ideas might take shape. He thought about the young mechanics and engineers who would walk through these doors, some with degrees, some without, each bringing a spark the world might have overlooked. When the tour ended, he stood for a long moment, watching a welder send bright sparks cascading into the winter air. This was more than a building. It was an invitation. The day of Emma's MIT symposium came quickly. Jack and Alessandra sat side by side in the auditorium as Emma stepped to the podium. She spoke with the same quiet confidence he had once brought to the Detroit stage, explaining the collaborative project she and her father had worked on. She answered questions with poise, her passion lighting up every word. Jack felt an ache of pride so strong it almost startled him. This wasn't just about engines or designs. It was about the fact that she was already taking their work further than he had ever imagined. Afterward, she found him in the crowd. Well, she asked. You were perfect, he said, meaning every word. Better than perfect. Spring settled over Millfield, and with it came small changes that added up quickly. The garage's reputation drew in more customers, some driving hours for a consultation. Journalists still called now and then, though Jack preferred the quiet satisfaction of problem-solving to the noise of publicity. Alessandra spent more time in town, the ease between them deepening with each shared project and unhurried dinner. One Friday evening, as they locked up the garage, she turned to him. You know, Jack, you've become the thing you've always been, just with more people finally noticing. He chuckled. Took them long enough. In late summer, the research center held its opening ceremony. Jack stood on the stage with Alessandra, the mayor, and a handful of executives. Cameras clicked as the ribbon was cut, but Jack's focus was on the young faces in the crowd, students, apprentices, and self-taught inventors who had come to see the place for themselves. When it was his turn to speak, he kept it simple. I built my first workable design in the margins of an old notebook. No one saw it but me for years. If you've got ideas, keep working on them. Test them. Protect them. Because sometimes the world needs time to catch up. That evening, the three of them, Jack, Emma, and Alessandra, sat outside the garage, watching the sun set behind the hills. The air smelled faintly of cut grass and motor oil, an oddly comforting combination. Emma leaned against his shoulder. "You happy, Dad?" she asked. Jack thought about it. About the years of struggle, the nights of sketching by lamplight, the mockery, the unexpected turns, and the way one chance encounter had changed everything. He looked at the glowing horizon, then at the people sitting beside him. "Yeah," he said, "I'm happy." The world beyond Millfield was wide and unpredictable, but for the first time in nearly 2 decades, the road ahead didn't feel like a fight to survive. It felt like a journey worth taking, and Jack Wilson, mechanic, engineer, mentor, was ready to drive it.